I will
But
say
just
that,
that.
just so you know, we will be leaving our around 2:55. We do have our daily stand up and we hope we just finished our code. Well, the meeting's until 4, that's why I wanted to give you that heads
No,
up.
usually they.
Hey,
finish-
Cynthia, you guys are not on mute. There you go.
Who wants to do this? Sharing of screen. I can share it now.
Hey, Cynthia, we can still hear you. Matthew, would you want to start? I think we are 2 minutes past 1.
I think you can start.
Sure.
Okay. We'll start now. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Rafelson. I'm with Level 4, which consulting group that is helping CPUC with the these TWGs, and this is the TWG number 3 on the interruption cost estimator calculator 2.0. We can move forward. We always start with the safety message. Now that summer is here, many of us look forward to enjoying outdoor grilling with family and friends. However, grilling also has serious fire risks if proper safety measures aren't followed. According to the National Fire Protection Association, almost 20,000 patients go to emergency rooms every year because of grilling-related injuries. Practicing safe grilling habits is essential to preventing fires and keeping everyone safe this grilling season. Here are some key grilling safety tips. Grill outdoors and always away from buildings. Use your grill in an open area, preferably at least several feet away from your home, tree branches, and other flammable structures. Never leave the grill unattended. Stay close to the grill when in use. Use proper tools. Opt for long-handed utensils and heat-resistant gloves instead of shorter-handed tools to help you safely handle hot food on the grill and avoid accidental burns. And for more information, there's a website called Grilling Safety Facts and Resources /NFPA. Okay. Here is our some housekeeping items. This meeting will be recorded. One or more decision makers may be present during the meeting, but no decisions will be taken. Attendees have the ability to unmute themselves. Attendees will be asked to stay muted except during the discussion period. During the presentation portion of each session, attendees can enter questions into the chat box. If there is not enough time to respond to all chat box questions during the workshops, SPD will collect answers to those questions and circulate them to the service list after. During the discussion, please use the hands raised function to speak, and the moderator will do their best to call on the attendees in order. After the question is asked, attendees should lower their hand. IT-related questions can be directed to Blake Mitchell at blakemitchell.mitchell@cpuc.ca.gov or Joseph Haga, josephhaga.haga@cpuc.ca.gov. Okay. The main parts of the agenda, we will be having presentations from on ICE 2.0 from LBNL, Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. We are scheduled for a break at the top of the hour, and then we will have PGE's presentation, and if needed, we will have a break at after theirs as well. Okay, the agenda will be relatively fixed to accommodate presenters and stakeholder schedules. Flexibility is allowed only if there's consensus. And now let's do our roll call. CPUC staff, I know Amin is on. Anyone else from CPUC? It's
Julian
Tara.
Ennis with Energy Division.
Okay.
Yeah, Brett Haynes from Safety Policy Division.
Okay.
Jason Portico, Energy Division.
Great, thank you, Jason. Is Coco on or Taru? No. Okay, who do we have from PG&E?
Hey, good afternoon. This is Justin Sadler with PG&E. I'm also here with Elijah Devon, and we're going to be presenting at 2:10 for PG&E.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone from Public Advocates?
This is Ian Fisher from Public Advocates.
Thank you. Sempra Companies?
Yes, good afternoon. This is Tim Node with SDG&E. We have a few members of our team on the call as well. Thank you.
Great. Mussy Grade? Okay. Turn, the Utility Reform Network. Right. Anyone from SCE, Southern Cal Edison?
Hey, this is Brian Landry. We have several members of our team on the call. Thank you.
Right. California Farm Bureau, CFB. Telecommunications representatives. Anyone from Green Power Institute, GPI? Okay. California Utilities Employees, CUE. Anyone else who I haven't called and who would like to announce themselves? Okay, this TWG will be focused on the ICE Calculator 2.0, which is used to monetize reliability benefits and cost-benefit analyses. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory will present that update regarding the ICE Calculator and comparing it to the previous version. PG&E will then present on how they adopted the new ICE Calculator in its GRC filing. The purpose of the TWG meetings is to solicit stakeholder feedback and input on potential changes to Table 6 on the data template, which is related to the ICE 2.0 calculator. As this is expected to be the final TWG, SPD expects that the data template will be finalized by July 24th, 2025, in other words, a month from today. Okay. The purpose and expected outcomes of the TWG. Before moving forward, we will provide context by referencing the past. On June 3rd and June 10th, SPD also hosted 2 TWGs to discuss the details of the revised SB-884 project list data requirement guidelines and provide an opportunity for initial Q&A. The June 10th TWG provided stakeholders with an opportunity to present their feedback and recommendations on the revised SB-884 project list data requirements guideline. SPD is expecting to receive written comment on the guidelines today. Next slide. So the purpose of the first TWG meeting held by CPUC Safety Policy Division on June 3rd was to introduce the draft SB-884 project list data requirements template and provide an opportunity for the stakeholders to discuss their questions and feedback. The data template is designed to support phase 2 applications and progress reports of the electrical undergrounding plans, EUPs, required under Senate Bill 884. SPD shared and presented the Excel-based data template and the accompanying PDF guideline document explaining the data structure, field names, descriptions, and input constraints. The outcome was that stakeholders gained an understanding of the proposed data template and for SPD to receive preliminary feedback on whether or how to update the template before it becomes a formal requirement for phase 2 EUP applications and subsequent progress reports. Building on TWG number 1, TWG number 2, held by SPD on June 10th, 2025, mainly focused on discussing stakeholder feedback on the draft data template and to answer stakeholders' questions, and to provide further clarification by SPD on key data inputs and data structure of draft SB-884 project list data requirements template. So this slide 6, great. This TWG will focus on the underlying methodology used to monetize reliability benefits in cost-benefit analyses, specifically the adoption of the ICE 2.0 interruption cost estimator calculator developed by LBNL.
Those options are normally.
Hi, can you mute yourself, please? LBNL will present the major updates in ICE 2.0, which is required for utilities transitioning to CPUC's cost-benefit approach under D.22-12-027. PG&E will share how they applied ICE 2.0 to support their 2027 general rate case, GRC, offering a practical example of data application. The group will discuss whether the existing SB-884 template should be updated to reflect ICE 2.0's new parameters. I will now turn it over to Lawrence Berkeley to tell us about the new ICE 2.0 cost estimator.
All right, thanks so much, and thanks so much for inviting us to speak here today. I can speak for the entire ICE 2.0 research team here at LBNL and Resource Innovations in saying we're excited to be talking about the updated and newly released ICE calculator. It has been more than 3.5 years since we signed the first contract with the first utility at the end of 2021. And so it's been a long time coming to get to this point. From our perspective, it's been a wonderful journey, and we're pleased to finally get to the point of sharing this initial release of the tool with everyone. For folks who don't know, my name's Christina Lachamar. I'm a program manager at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and serve as the project manager on the LBNL side for this work. I've been at LBNL for more than 25 years now and have been working with the ICE calculator ever since it was a baby, when it was still in a spreadsheet model format, well before the online web interface was launched in 2009. So really happy to have sort of seen the evolution of the tool over time and really see it getting this much needed major facelift and overhaul. Next slide. So this was a large multi-million-dollar initiative, and as such really couldn't have been done without the help of everyone shown here on this slide as part of the ICE 2.0 research team, as well as the scores of other individuals from the sponsoring utilities that all help make this possible. The initiative is led by Peter Larson. He's the PI. I'm also joined today with my esteemed colleague, Joe Edo, formerly of LBNL, who's really, in my opinion, the visionary behind the ICE calculator tool and currently serves as a senior strategic advisor. Mike Spears and Sarah Poon were also instrumental in the development of the updated tool and API, and Mike is joining us today as well to help field questions that you might have with respect to the API capability. Also joining me today is Chris Ramey, and I believe also George Jung from Resource Innovations. Chris and George have been doing an incredible job of leading the survey administration, conducting the analysis of the survey responses, as well as leading the modeling effort for the tool. And shout out to the rest of the RI team, Ridge and Kyle, as well as their own senior advisor, Michael Sullivan, who's really been a part of the evolution of this ICE calculator from the beginning as well. We've also had the privilege of working with one of the world's most leading economists in non-market valuation, Professor Michael Hanneman, who was previous faculty at UC Berkeley, really helped us in thinking through and developing an updated approach for assessing residential customer willingness to pay. Next slide. So this is how we structured today's talk. Chris and I will be splitting up the presentation. We'll start with a brief overview and background for the motivation behind the ICE 2.0 initiative, as well as how we're rolling this out in a phased approach. We'll then go over the surveying and modeling approaches and their corresponding results. Following this, we'll go through the updated tool and provide a brief overview of a comparison of ICE 2.0 to 1.0, and then obviously answer any questions that you have. Next slide. Next, yeah. So I believe most of this audience is quite familiar with the ICE calculator, but just to provide a quick recap, Berkeley Labs Interruption Cost Estimate Calculator represents the leading and only publicly available tool for estimating the customer cost of power interruptions, those that are short in duration. The development of the ICE calculator was originally sponsored by the Department of Energy and really enabled its launch in 2009. Since that time, the tool has gained a lot of popularity and traction and is currently being used to support internal utility reliability planning activities, serve as a basis for discussing utility reliability investments with their regulators, as well as to assess the economic impact of past power outages. Next slide. So what was the motivation for updating the ICE calculator? The original ICE calculator 1.0 was based on utility-sponsored customer surveys, and as such, it introduced a series of biases that we sought to address. The first being that the surveys were being administered in different ways. Secondly, that these surveys were asking different sets of questions. And lastly, that these utilities were administering these surveys for different purposes. As well, we also acknowledge that the data currently, or that were informing rather, the ICE 1.0 version of the calculator were quite dated. Many of the surveys were more than 25, if not close to 35 years old at this point, with the most recent survey conducted in 2012. We also acknowledged that the ICE 1.0 model was not statistically representative of all regions of the US. We had better representation in the West and Southwest with identifiable gaps in other regions of the US. Lastly, I'll point out that ICE 1.0 did have a limited amount of survey data available that estimated the cost of interruptions for interruptions lasting longer than 12 hours in length. Next slide. So we sought to address, all those shortcomings, and so what have we done to really update and upgrade this tool? Berkeley Lab, in partnership with Resource Innovations, as well as with the sponsoring utilities, developed a couple of key committees. The first being a project executive committee that is made up of representatives from each of the sponsoring utilities. We also created a project advisory committee made up of representatives from many of the well-known external stakeholders in the land of acronyms that we're familiar with: NARUC, NASIO, NASUCA, APPA, NRECA, EEI, EPRI, and DOE were all party to that advisory committee. These two committees, the PEC and the PAC, provided critical and key feedback and/or approvals throughout this process. As an example, both of those committees helped provide feedback as we developed and finalized a consistent set of short duration customer interruption cost surveys, those lasting up to 24 hours in duration. As a result of that, we were able to coordinate a consistent administration of those surveys and then develop new short duration customer damage function equations based on this new survey information, and then update the ICE calculator website with new enhancements. Next slide. Next. So as many of you know, we are conducting this initiative in phases, and phase 1 is just completed. This is based on 11 surveys conducted largely in the eastern and midwestern portions of the U.S., with one utility in the Pacific Northwest. At the end of April, we did the initial release of the first version of the updated ICE Calculator 2.0, based on newly developed customer damage functions and a completely upgraded web interface with the API capability. I'll also note that phase 2 is currently in process, and we are excited to say that the surveying phase for phase 2 is now complete. So all of the surveys for all of the California IOUs as well as the Missouri utilities is now done, and we are now in the process of analyzing and processing all of those survey responses, and we'll soon start getting to updating the modeling for the ICE calculator. The expectation is that by the end of this year or early next, we will release the next version of the ICE calculator that basically includes both information from phase 1 and phase 2. Also want to mention that we also do plan on a phase 3, and that's currently in process, and we are still currently recruiting for that phase to help fill in some of the remaining geographic gaps that we have in our map that I'll show in the next slides. Surveying is in process with select utility co-ops in the US, and later this year we do hope to survey another utility in the West region. Next slide. So this map represents the utilities that participated in phase 1 of the initiative. Basically, the survey responses from these utilities are what are currently informing the current version of the ICE Calculator 2.0. It represents 8 sponsors, 11 distinct survey activities covering a total of 24 different investor-owned utility distribution service territories. And the next slide, it shows the incorporation of both phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 definitely has more of the West Coast representation with the addition of 4 additional surveys, 3 in California and 1 conducted for a conglomerate of utilities in Missouri. Phase 1 and phase 2 represent 30 different investor-owned utility distribution service territories across the US. And also touching on phase 3, just to let you know, we did receive support from DOE to partner with NRECA to survey select rural co-ops across the US in some of these gaps in this map. Next slide. So now I will turn it over to Chris Ramey, who will cover the surveying and modeling portions of this presentation.
Thank you, Christina. Yes, I'm going to start with the surveying approach, how we reached out to customers, so the data we collected, and then how we translated that into the customer damage functions. But starting with the valuation approach, which is how we collected the cost information from the 2 different customer classes you can see on the screen here. Residential and non-residential customers had slightly different valuation methods. So with the residential customers, we used a willingness to pay approach with a hypothetical backup service that the customers could indicate how much they were willing to pay to avoid having an outage. Much of the costs residential customers face are related to inconvenience, which is the reason for the 2 different valuation methods between res and non-res. However, there are some tangible costs that residential customers could face, including relocating, buying supplies, going out to eat, inability to work. All those would be examples of tangible costs customers face when there is an outage. For the non-res customers, we use more of a direct cost approach where we looked at the value of lost production, added the interruption related costs, and then subtracted any savings. So you can see in the sub bullets there of examples of each of the costs that we collected from non-res customers, anywhere from labor costs to make up lost production, to material costs, costs to operate backup generation. And then under that, you can see some savings that actually could occur from having an interruption, including unpaid wages if employees are sent home if there's an interruption, and then also cost of raw materials or cost of fuel not used. Next slide, please. So going into the survey itself, there were 3 different distinct surveys: residential, small, medium, non-residential, and large, non-residential. So for each of those, the customers could see potentially up to 4 different interruption durations. Momentary, 2 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours were the 4 different interruption durations on our surveys. We also varied some of the scenarios, such as season, day of week, the time of day, or if customers saw advance warning or had advance warning of the outage itself. So in the table there underneath, you could see an example of what a individual customer might see. So for this customer, the base scenario is a summer weekday outage where the onset time remains constant. And the thing that changes is the duration. And then the other thing that changes after they answer a question for a summer weekday, they would be asked how their costs change for a summer weekend. So we varied, one of the variables at a time. In this case, it's weekend, weekday. But for other customers, it could be advance warning or time of day or season. Could vary as well for other customers. Included in the survey at the very end was also a longer duration question, which was 3 days in length. Although this was not used in the ICE calculator to update it, we did want to collect some information on how customers would react to a longer outage. Some of the questions were qualitative in nature, including how customers might prepare or react after they receive news of the outage, whether that be travel to a different location, shut down the facility, things like that. So for each of the sponsoring utilities, we did have a target number of responses we wanted to receive. That included 250 residential, 250 small, medium, and then 67 large customers was the target for each individual utility. Those targets were set to help us ensure we're hitting our significance, or hoping to hit statistical significance for each individual utility, but also in aggregate for the ICE calculator, we wanted to make sure we had a large enough sample size to build the customer damage functions. And then lastly, we did stratify by usage. So that means we oversampled the largest usage customers on purpose. So in general, the largest usage customers make up a small percentage of the population for a utility. However, they represent a large portion of the electricity consumed. So using a simple random sample might result in those customers not showing up in the sample frame at all. So we made a concerted effort to really go after the largest customers in each utility and try to get responses from those customers so they could be represented in the calculator. Next slide, please. So after all the survey efforts, we did collect a large number of responses. This summarizes the responses that we did receive, starting from the entire customer population of all the phase 1 utilities. You can see there are over 22 million customers for res, over 2 million customers for non-res. And then from which case we cut that population down to our sample. And then you can see the response target there across all phase 1 and the total number of responses we received. So we exceeded the response target for both res and non-res. In total, we received about 3,316 residential responses, almost 4,500 non-res responses. So we were quite pleased with achieving our target and getting over what we'd originally set out to get. And then on the last column there, you can see the validated responses. So that's after cleaning the data, going through and checking the responses for illogical or outlier responses, invalid responses. Though that number there, the 3,026 and the 3,874 are the final number of responses we use to build the customer damage functions for our model. Next slide, please. Just to break that out a little further, you can see here from the 11 sponsoring utilities how many responses we got for res and non-res for each of them. I believe in almost every single one of them, we went over our initial target, ranging from 270 to over 300 for res, and just below 200 to over 400 for non-res. So a good representation from each of the different phase 1 utilities. Next slide, please. As far as the 3 California IOUs that are going to be incorporated into phase 2, we have completed survey efforts for all 3. PG&E and SCE were completed in April, and SDG was just completed a couple weeks ago in June. So you can see the responses we received on the right-hand side there. Generally very pleased with how things went, and we got a good representation from all 3 of the utilities. Next slide, please. So I'm going to move into the modeling approach and how we translated the surveys into the customer damage functions, and then show some of the results that we found. So starting with those survey responses, the ultimate goal was to build the customer damage function. That is just another way of saying the regression models that we use in the ICE calculator. So our goal here is to take a customer population, input variables that are related to outage costs, and then output the interruption costs for that customer population. So some examples of explanatory variables that go into the model would be duration, consumption, income, industry type, and I have another slide on this in a moment here, but there are other variables that are considered as well. So the customer damage functions allow your user to estimate the cost for a specific population. And by population, right, that could mean an entire utility's jurisdiction. It could mean an entire state. It could mean the customers served on a specific circuit. So the population is defined, how the user wants to define it. So once they have that customer population, you can take the average characteristics for that population, whether it be usage, income level, industry, duration, and plug those values in to the ICE calculator, and it outputs an interruption costs. So as far as the models, as far as the variables themselves in the model, on the left-hand side here, we have for the residential customers, the potential variables that could have been included in the ICE calculator. We narrowed those variables down to those that were most predictive of outage costs. So when looking at the right-hand side, you can see the final variables that were included, which includes duration, annual usage, season, backup generation, work from home status, and income level. So we generally looked at the variables that were most predictive of outage costs, but we also considered the variables if they were easy to find the data. So for example, it might not be easy to find persons in household as a variable. So we did consider the user in mind when doing the ICE calculator, and also to see how easy it would be for them to get the data to input for their specific population. So with the variables on the right-hand side there, those are customizable for any population that a user would like to estimate interruptions costs for. The user could change around the income variables buckets for the different percentage of people in each of those income buckets, for example, and it would change the outage related costs. I should also mention that when sampling, we did try to get a broad range of when sampling, we try to get a broad range of residential customers as far as income level. We did check when we got the survey data itself that we were getting representation from all sorts of different income classes as the data was coming in. Next slide, please. So this is a similar slide for non-residential. So you can see the variables that potentially could be included and then the final variables that were included there. So in the non-res model, the final variables were duration, usage, advanced warning of the interruption, day of week, and also the industry. The formatting got a little messed up there, but the industries are healthcare and social assistance, manufacturing, and then all other industries is its own category. So for modeling purposes, the two non-residential categories, which are the small, medium, and the LNR, are combined into one non-res segment. So previously, ICE 1.0 did have a separate category for small and then medium, large non-residential customers. And that sort of cutoff was determined, back in 2009 between those two customer classes as 50,000 annual usage, annual kWh. So for ICE 2.0, we found that one model was sufficient at determining the costs for different sizes for non-residential. So for that reason, there is only one model, and there's also one breakout in the calculator for non-residential. However, I should say that the calculator can estimate the costs based on what the user inputs. So if a user wants to estimate the cost for their small customers, they can do that. If they want to estimate the cost for their medium customers, they can do that. They just have to change the inputs to reflect that customer population. So the ICE 2.0 is more powerful in the sense because the user can align their small, medium, and large customers with their own definition if they want to. So each utility might have a different definition for what a large customer is. So they can then align that with the ICE calculator 2.0. With 1.0, that determination was sort of set in stone at that cutoff level I mentioned previously. Next slide, please. And yeah, lastly, some results. So, what do the customer damage functions look like graphed? So we have the non-res and res here. So you can see that, starting with momentary outages for res, we're looking at about $2, increasing all the way to over $50. And I should say this is, the average customer using average inputs, what you would see. And then for non-res, we're looking at about $500 for momentary interruptions, all the way up to over $12,000 for 24-hour interruptions. So, yep, this is just the average sort of customer damage function if you plot it out over the entire duration from 0 to 24. And you can see the confidence intervals there as well in the blue. And I will hand it back over to Christina.
All right, thank you, Chris. Next slide. Let's talk about the ICE Calculator website now. If you haven't already, please check it out, icecalculator.com. This is just a snapshot of the homepage. As I mentioned before, the website has undergone a complete revamp and has a whole new look and feel. We really wanted to maintain the simplicity of the interface, but yet give it an updated look. So hopefully you'll agree that we achieved that. But definitely, feel free to throw any feedback at us and suggestions for improvement. We're always open to that. There are 4 main actions that you can take from this homepage. You can estimate interruption costs. You can estimate the value of a reliability improvement. Both of those actions can be taken by hitting either of the green arrows in the center of that homepage. For those super users, as I mentioned, we have a brand new API feature in the tool. So please check that out with links on either the top or the bottom of this page. And lastly, I want to just point out and strongly encourage you to check out the documentation page. It's not very often that you know, we try and give a shout out to our documentation page, but I think it has a ton of information that will be really helpful if you have questions or want to learn more about this tool. In this next slide, we have a snapshot of what this documentation page looks like when you go to it. You'll find a series of expandable tabs where you can get more information about the tool, reach out for technical support, find links to video tutorials showing how to use the tool. And just FYI, we're still in the process of adding more content to that. So, you know, if you're finding those helpful, please continue to check back. And then under the ICE 2.0 tab is a ton of information about the current version of the ICE calculator. In it, you'll find we just posted the final report from phase 1 that we released last week. I know that, you know, the California utilities are not part of phase 1, but it's a very lengthy, comprehensive report. And I think you'll learn a lot in terms of what to expect when we release the next final report when phase 2 gets released. You can also find a link to an FAQs. I think we're envisioning this as sort of a living document. We'll just be adding to it as, you know, more questions come in that we think would be useful for the general audience to reference. Also want to mention there's a link to a short memo comparing ICE 2.0 to 1.0. And then also you can find a link to the actual survey instruments that are used for the utility surveys that we can of this initiative. And then also you can find a series of other technical reports that have been used along the way to help inform this process. The bottom 3 tabs, I believe, are largely applications and more information on ICE 1.0. But just an FYI, that 1.0 spreadsheet is available freely for download under that respective tab. Next slide. So I also want to mention with respect to this documentation page that users can request the spreadsheet-based version of the ICE 2.0 model, but we are currently sharing these on a case-by-case basis. The spreadsheets will be made available if not shared outside of the requester's organization and not used for commercial purposes. The reason why we're doing so is, you know, LBNL is still working with DOE in sort of asserting copyright and IP associated with content in those spreadsheets. And then, you know, like I said before, the ICE 1.0 spreadsheets are freely available for download under that respective tab. Next slide. So as I mentioned, one of the main uses of the tool is to estimate interruption costs by simply inputting your respective state or states that you're interested in, the number of residential and non-residential customers, and their associated reliability metric information. The model will provide this dashboard of results. The top table shows the estimated cost for each customer class expressed per customer, per event, per average kilowatt, per unserved kilowatt hour, per minute interruption, per annual cost, and then lastly, total costs across all customers, where all costs are reported in 2023 dollars. The total cost is reflected in the pie chart below that. And then to the left of the pie chart are 2 smaller tables where costs per event are expressed relative to daily and annual household income, as well as by daily and annual GDP for residential and non-residential customers, respectively. These normalized values can help inform and may change prioritization of where reliability investments may actually be needed. As well, you can also modify these income and GDP metrics that are being calculated here in the bottom tab on the left-hand side of the dashboard. Also on the left-hand side of the dashboard, you can do things like save your model, download the inputs and outputs from your model run, manage various models by creating an account. You can also modify any of the inputs that went into that model run. The state selected, the number of customers by customer class, as well as those reliability metric inputs that you couldn't do previously without having to rerun the model. Also want to make mention of the fact that you can also, under the additional settings, further refine the model assumptions for those various predictor variables that Chris was mentioning. Things like residential average kilowatt hour, that income bracket category distribution, backup generation and work from home, as well as non-residential average kilowatt hour usage, industry mix, and advanced warning. And lastly, I'll mention that we do have a specific video tutorial for this feature of the site that does a much better job of walking through an actual example. And so please check that out if you're interested in that. Next slide. And then another key feature of the tool is the ability to estimate reliability benefits of a proposed investment. In a nutshell, this feature basically takes two model runs at different points in time with specified investment parameters for discount and inflation rate and calculates the difference in the estimated benefit over time. This snapshot of the results dashboard shows the net present value of the total benefits for all customers, parsed by customer class and per customer. The table on the chart show the estimated costs both with and without the improvement in place by year. And then the left side of the dashboard shows that same series of model settings that can be modified similar to what I mentioned for estimating the cost dashboard. Next slide. So we're excited to share that with the update and release of this tool. We're also including an API capability to address higher volume batch jobs of the model. This basically came about because, one utility in particular was really just submitting thousands of batch run requests at one time and really overloading the server. And so we really wanted to make it easier, not only on our side, but for the user as well to do these higher volume requests. Shown here is a snapshot of the API documentation where you can learn more about how to use this feature if you're interested. And as I mentioned, Mike Spears, who's also on this call, is our guru who really developed this feature and provided a ton of information on this page, including how to create an account, generate an API key, as well as providing example coding in different languages for your consideration if you're interested. The API key is provided to run both the interruption cost estimate and reliability benefits model runs, and also includes examples. I believe there was some interest in this API feature, so hopefully during that Q&A session after I'm done here, he can address any questions that you have about that. Next slide. So for the last part of my presentation, basically every participating utility has asked the question, so what's the difference between ICE 2.0 and 1.0? And I'll first note that we have developed a brief memo that can be found, like I said, under that documentation page that presents the differences in the assumptions going into the model. And next slide. And we've gone through and just provided a summary of what those key differences are in this table on this slide. But that memo also does a walkthrough of a comparison calculation. And, just to provide a recap of some of the stuff we already mentioned, obviously survey vintage is a huge difference. All of the surveys from the ICE 2.0 initiative were conducted in the last 3 years, compared to the 25 to 35-year-old surveys that were informing ICE 1.0. The survey approach is significantly improved. Not only are we using a consistent set of survey questions, we are conducting and administering the survey in a consistent fashion. Ari's done an incredible job with this. And we also were able to incorporate updated thinking with the residential willingness to pay approach. Geographic coverage, obviously ICE 1.0 had identifiable gaps with better coverage in the West and the Southeast regions of the US. And one of the key objectives of ICE 2.0 is to have full and complete representation across all regions in the US, which is why we're rolling this out in phases. Obviously, phase 1 was definitely more representative of survey responses that we received in the Eastern and Midwestern portions of the US, but we're definitely working toward having more complete representation, if not all complete representation, of all regions across the US by the time we're done with this initiative. With respect to interruption durations considered, this was done basically very consistently for ICE 2.0. Focusing on those 4 specific interruption durations. So now we have much better idea of momentary interruptions lasting up to 5 minutes, all the way up to 24 hours in length. As Chris mentioned, the customer damage functions before were parsed out into 1 residential and 2 separate non-residential equations, and currently, based on the modeling that we've done from the phase 1 utilities, we have 2 distinct customer damage functions, 1 for residential and 1 for non-residential. I believe that's pretty much it for my slides. I think I might have one more slide. Just want to note that, again, this work and this initiative is still in process, and we still have phases 2 and 3 to incorporate into the model. And we do expect changes with respect to the modeling and also potentially including some of those predictor variables that identified with this initial release of the model. As I also mentioned, we look forward to sharing the updates that reflect the California utilities later this year with the completion of phase 2. At the end of this year, early next, you should expect to see a similar release, including a final report that reflects results from both phase 1 and phase 2. With that, I will close up and just mention we do provide some links to some reports that may be of interest if you have further questions, but definitely want to thank you all for your time, and yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so let's move into our questions session now. I see one hand up for Vincent Lowe.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Vincent Lowe from Pacific Gas and Electric Company. If we could go back to the slide about the explanatory variables, please. Not this one, yeah, a few more back. Yeah, on the residential, that's right. Yeah, that one. So if you could describe, the relationship between total household income and your outage costs, I'd like to learn more about that. More specifically, right? For example, if we hold all the other variables the same, but we only vary the household income, how does the interruption cost change by doing that?
Yeah, so in general, we do find that the income bucket, the $150,000 per year income bucket, will have higher costs for that group compared, to the other groups. So in general, we find that the cost customers face does increase with income, holding the other variables constant. However, it should be noted that the cost relative to the proportion of your income is sort of could also be considered. So relative to your income, the lowest income bucket would have the highest costs, so to speak, and that metric is also shown on icecalculator.com, the cost relative to income.
I'm sorry, could you say the last part again? I'm not sure I caught what you were saying.
Yeah, the cost relative to one's income, based on these 4 income buckets, that is a metric that is shown on icecalculator.com as well. So if you go in and run the model, you will see the costs broken out by income bucket relative to the amount of money people make per year.
So, but in general, the higher the total household income, generally the higher the outage cost would be, right?
Correct.
So why is that?
And we did not necessarily ask, specific questions about, why people would face higher costs for higher income. However, based on our methodology, it's based on the willingness to pay for people. So it could be hypothesized that, higher income people have different characteristics that would have more costs related to them. It's possible that, higher income people, there's higher percent that works from home, for example, in which case an outage might affect them more, and they would be willing to pay more to avoid the outage.
Yeah, or they could have more money to spend, right? To
Correct.
avoid the inconveniences. Okay, so another question related to that. Will you be using these income levels when you work on phase 2? These specific income levels for the California utilities in phase 2?
We will likely keep these income buckets the same level, the same 4 buckets. We will go through the same process that we went through in phase 1, where we start with a large number of variables, like all the variables you can see on the left-hand side there. And then we determine which are the most predictive of outage costs. If I had to guess, I would say that income would stay in the model for phase 2, but we will go through the process again, and we'll determine, which variables, if any of the variables will move in and out based on the phase 2 utilities.
Right, but and you also be examining whether, for example, 150 is the right number for the Western utility, the California utilities, and 100 to 150 is the right level to use, right?
Yeah, those income buckets are on a national level. It is a national tool, so we did use census level track data to determine those buckets the best we could. But yes, we will also look at the percentage of customers in each of those buckets, so we can get a broad range of representation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next we have Stefan Schoencheck.
Hi, yes, Stefan Schoencheck, California Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. I had a few technical questions about the fitting of the model. First of all, I believe you've described this as some type of best fit model. Could you describe the nature? Are you doing manipulations beyond just like a linear regression on these, or is it some type of perceptron approach or something else? And then also, kind of with that, as you're doing the variable elimination, are you doing like a principal component analysis or some kind of tuple analysis? And then I likely have a follow-up question.
Okay, I'll start on that last one. So for both the res and the non-res, we started with a lasso approach. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. Yep. So we start with the lasso approach to help guide our decision making and help determine which of the variables were most predictive. And then we did it from there. We sort of whittled the list down, and then we used a cross-validation approach to determine the final models. So we were able to cross-validate the predictive power of the models to get to that final list. The non-residential model is a two-part model. So it uses a probit and a GLM. So the first part is the probit. It predicts the probability of a person having an outage. And then the second part is a GLM, which predicts the outage cost itself for those people who incur a cost. And that approach is commonly used with data that has a high density of zero values. So, there are a lot of non-residential customers that would not face any costs. They put zero in the survey, especially for, a momentary outage. There's no tangible costs for non-residential customers. So because of that mass of zeros, that distribution mass, we use the two-part model for non-res. For res, we use a sort of a weighted GLM model to determine the cost there. And we developed that with the help of Michael Hanneman, who Christina mentioned earlier in the call.
And then kind of final question on model specifics. Is there any documentation of convergence studies or how the model fits the data specifically for the different categorical variables that you've identified, and then also the model sensitivity to the continuous variables?
We've not yet conducted a sensitivity analysis. It is something that we have talked about doing for phase 2. But the phase 1 report, which is on the ICE Calculator website, does go into quite a bit of detail on the different sort of variables here and how each of them affect the model. So yeah, I would encourage you to check out the full report on the ICE Calculator website.
All right, thank you for your responses.
All right, next up is Ian Fisher.
Hi there, thanks for the presentation, really appreciate it. Ian Fisher from Cal Advocates. Somewhere in this presentation, you presented 2 graphs of interruption costs by interruption duration. Could we just flick to that slide, please?
If you go forward 2, it should be that slide.
Okay, thanks. No, this is just for everybody's reference. So I understand, I can kind of understand what this is, your residential and non-residential models. Can you explain why they appear so linear? I would expect, and you can explain why my expectations are incorrect here, there to be some sort of step changes in the response for residential, at like the 12 to 14 hour or later in the period, simply because of the cost. I don't see why the costs would be linear. Can you explain why you think they are? The growth of the costs are linear?
Yeah, and to be clear, these are not linear models. They are non-linear models.
I understand that, but it's okay. I understand the non-linear. I can see the curve at the 1 to 2 hour period, but I would expect some sort of step change in the 12 to 24 hour period as well, as people's fridges and refrigerators fail, and you start to have to replace food. So yes. I'm just trying to work out where those kind of why this appears to be more linear than I would expect. I would expect a step change. And yeah, go on, sorry.
We do see the fastest increase in the very beginning, so go from momentary to the 2 hour mark or so. We do see that rapid increase, the fastest increase there. Another thing to keep in mind is this is the average outage, right? So this is average time of day, average season, all the variables. So this doesn't represent, an outage at 8 a.m. on a weekday, and then in 12 hours later, it's nighttime or something like that, where there could be some effects of, companies starting business and stopping business. Things like that are not accounted for here. This is the average outage, time and as far as some of those variables as far as starting time. as far as the step change, it certainly is, possible that, yeah, some people are going to have their food's going to go bad at exactly 4 hours, right? And then they're going to see a large increase in costs. However, we're looking at a large population of customers here. So when you take that over an average, right, it sort of smooths out those effects. And in general, we haven't seen huge jumps, I would say, just based on the duration timing. We see that sort of increase in the beginning that's rather rapid, and then a slower increase over time.
That's interesting because that's not what you see if you look at the utility claims, people's claims against utilities. So, okay, thanks for the explanation. It's because everything is averaged out and smoothed out functionally. But this data here we're looking at is not, this is interpolated. This is the modeled data. This is not the actual survey data, is it? This is the actual this is the model, not the survey.
This is modeled. Yes, this is modeled.
Yeah.
We have the 4 durations that we did survey about, momentary, 2 hour, 8 hour, 24 hour. And then, yes, the model interpolates in between those points.
So everything except the 2, the 4, the 8, and the 12, or whatever, the 24, 8, and 24 is actually pure interpolation. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next up we have Igor. Igor Gain.
Hey there, Chris. Thanks so much for talking through all this. It was super helpful and informative for me. I should also mention I'm a data science contractor with PG&E. I'm relatively new to this data set and to the methodology involved, and I was able to find the survey instrument, but there isn't as much on the actual deployment of the survey. Basically, the fielding. I assume this was sort of done online through some Qualtrics style platform, but yeah, I guess I'm just wondering if there's any documentation on the actual fielding of the survey beyond the instrument.
The report.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christina.
Definitely check out the phase 1 final report that I mentioned on the documentation page. That should go through more detail than probably you're wanting in terms of that. So I would start there. And if you have any further questions, let me know.
Cool. Thanks so much.
All right. Do we have any other questions while we have?
Looks like Eddie Schmidt.
Yeah, actually, Matthew, could I just mention that we're a little bit over time, and I was just thinking that I wanted to ask, I think I put it in the chat, if the folks from Lawrence Berkeley and RI would be able to join us for the 3 p.m. general discussion. I had a couple of follow-up questions I wanted to ask, but I think we should probably continue on with the agenda. Christina, would that be okay?
Yeah. I do want to be cognizant of Mike Spear's time. So, if there are any questions with respect to the API, it might be good to maybe get those out, if any.
Yeah, then I do have one quick question then for Mike, actually, if he's still on the line.
I'm here. I can be on later too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we can pause this for a while.
Oh, great. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right. So then we are a little bit behind schedule now. We should take our break. It's approximately 2:10, and why don't we return for the PG&E presentation at 2:20?
Is that okay, Brian?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank LBNL for a good API. It is much easier to use than the previous version, so I really appreciate what you guys have done. It is so much better. I was so impressed by how clean it was. I'm not just saying that. So thank you guys.
Oh, awesome.
Good to hear. Great. 10-minute break. Thanks, y'all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It is 2:20, and in the interest of staying on schedule, I would like to turn it over to PG&E to talk about how they're using the ICE 2.0 calculator in the 2027 test year GRC. Take it away, PG&E.
All right. Thanks, Matthew. This is Elijah Devon. Just to confirm, are you able to hear me clearly?
Sounding good.
Thanks. All right. I am Elijah Devon. I do work for PG&E in the Enterprise Risk Strategy team. And we'll be talking about the scenario that we've just run and released on June 20th regarding an ALJ order to disaggregate our electric reliability values. And in that time, we did attempt to transition from ICE 1.0 to 2.0 and did achieve some results using the ICE 2.0 calculator. I do note that this was filed and requested from the ALJ to be part of our general rate case, but kind of as indicated in the beginning, I am going to limit the discussion and the topics to just what is relevant to SB-884 in this technical working group, just so that we can keep it focused and make sure that we are providing relevant information to this proceeding. All right, next slide. Kind of iterating on what I just said. Next slide. These are the questions that we were presented to respond to for this presentation. Noting we have added a little bit to it, which I'll actually hand it over to Justin Sadler once we get down into how we apply that using TWG or using SB-884 TWG tables. But I'm not going to read over these questions as I'm about to go down each one per slide. So if you go ahead to the next slide. How did PG&E disaggregate its monetized value of electric reliability for the test year 2027 GRC? Do you want to provide the background here in this for our 2024 ramp, which was filed May 15, 2024? We did use the ICE 1.0 calculator as directed by the phase 2 decision, noting that that was the only one available at the time. On April 22nd, an administrative law judge ruled that by June 20th, which as you'll note was just this past Friday, PG&E shall provide a parallel reliability cost calculation using the disaggregated approach recommended in Safety Policy Division's evaluation report of our ramp. And we may opt to replace our system-wide average approach with this suggested method or present both approaches in the general rate case. Do you want to note that with the kind of timing on this, April 22nd, if I recall, it was April 29th was the date of the ICE 2.0 release. So we were very much in the process of figuring out how to respond to this, while I'll actually say our general rate case, which was filed then May 15th, was very much undergoing finishing touches and final reviews and everything. So we did kind of stagger this out as best we could in order to meet this June 20th deadline and provide our GRC timely on May 15th. And ICE 2.0 being released. I honestly was watching that website and was very thrilled to see when it came out. I've been working on that project with Christina and Chris for about the last year and a half, and it's been very interesting to get that level of detail in going through the surveys and how this was built. To go back into the disaggregation approach that the SPD evaluation report recommended, in order to apply it, again, the idea was to break apart this system-wide average that we used. We used the ICE 2.0 calculator to derive two discrete dollars per customer minutes interrupted for residential and non-residential. I may abbreviate that res and non-res as Chris was doing earlier. We then took that dollars per CMI for res and non-res, looked at each of our tranches, actually at the service point level to count each of our customer classes, which was res and non-res, to derive a tranche level percentage of each customer class. This was so that it would work within our models that are calculating at the tranche level. And then multiplied those percentages by those dollars per CMI to get a dollars per residential CMI, dollars per non-residential CMI at the tranche level to produce a tranche level dollars per CMI for modeling. So then that process was run through our models. And again, all of that was released in our June 20th filing. So if you want the full breakdown, that is all available there in that filing. Next slide. To provide a little bit more of a detailed view of how we did this calculation, this is kind of the practical example. Imagine, if you will, that there are 6 circuit segments in a single tranche. We have used ICE 2.0 to calculate an 8-cent residential dollars per CMI, which is actually what we use, and 2311 for a non-residential dollars per CMI. So let's take a look at circuit segment 1 here. Number of residential customers was 5 in that circuit segment. And then total customers was 24. So we're able to use that to calculate the 20.8% residential customers. So that is your D divided by C. So residential customers divided by total customers. And then in order to calculate dollars per CMI, column E as an echo here, you have E equals our residential dollars per CMI times our percent residential customers plus 23.11, our non-residential dollars per CMI, times 1 minus our percentage of residential customers. So that gives you the calculation, and then you can see we aggregated each circuit segment up to get to that tranche level, which you'll get as the aggregated tranche dollars per CMI. Next slide. This is now responding to question or sub-question alpha of number 1. How did that change? How did this process of disaggregation change the inputs to the ICE 1.0 calculator that PG&E presented in the initial 2027 GRC submission? Subpart subpart 1. What new inputs did PG&E include in order to use the ICE 2.0 calculator? What old inputs did PG&E remove in order to use the ICE 2.0 calculator? Do want to clarify, as kind of presented by LB&L, PG&E does not include or remove inputs from the ICE 2.0 calculator. Their calculator comes with default values, especially once you set in that API the California. And I actually do want to pause to double down on Brian Landry. Using that API is like worlds away, so much easier to actually run whatever test you want to do using that API. But also noting, as Christina mentioned, there is a phase 1, phase 2 is going to come later, as well as updates that I understand are pending and planned throughout that calculator. So things may change as we move along. And I will discuss that a little more later, but just noting that we don't control it, whether you're running the API or you're running the Excel version, which we have obtained, but we are not permitted. Peter Larson made this very clear. PG&E is not permitted to share the Excel version of the tool. So if you would like the Excel version, please reach out to LB&L, and I will leave it entirely in their discretion as to whether or not they can provide that. But we did obviously provide our ICE 1.0 inputs in the general rate case, the GRC, which you'll see in the left side of the table here. Noting this table does go across multiple slides, so don't expect to see everything yet. We did our best in the right table to kind of line up where data points from ICE 2.0 matched. And also noting back during, I believe it was Chris Ramey's section, where certain values, or certain fields, I should say, certain variables are impactful to the sensitivity of that dollars per CMI. And you do see that in the yellow used in ICE calculator model, and then purple is meant to denote when it is used to convert ICE calculator outputs to weighted average dollars per CMI. So meaning that value is also used, but it is used differently than the straight yellow version, which is just this value is sensitive when you put it into the ICE 2.0 calculator or 1.0 calculator if it's on that left-hand side. I don't want to go through and read each one of these values in the table. Just some things that I did want to really note. Things that really changed were percentage of residential customers by annual income. We've discussed this here, and I thought it was honestly very valuable to, so thanks Vincent for asking the question, and thanks Chris for your response, to hear a lot more about that percentage of residential customers by annual income, seeing as how that'll change your percent GDP output, as well as potentially what the value of electricity is for those residential if you have more in the higher income bracket. Backup generators working at home are brand new values, and obviously a completely different world than it was in 1989 when they first took the ICE 1.0 values. So things have really shifted to match modern standards, and also noting there were a ton more variables collected by ICE 1.0, meaning which it does not seem were particularly sensitive when used in the calculator if used at all. Next slide. Here's the next piece of the table. Again, honestly want to thank LB&L for very much simplifying this tool so you did not have to provide all of these fields, particularly if it wasn't particularly sensitive for the calculator. Noting industry percentages is now down to 2. Event details, non-residential advanced warning are new values that we are actually populating using some PG&E internal data and I do want to explain this here, ICE calculator provided values versus there was another field, sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, the PG&E survey. So there are 3 different sources that we use. Some of these like our number of residential customers on a circuit segment. That is PG&E internal data. We do collect that and update it at intervals for use in our risk models, as well as event details. Obviously, we do collect data about our own events and make sure that we are updating it for use in the calculator. ICE calculator provided values means that this value was default in the tool and we left it there because either we didn't have a better data source or the data that we found were actually the matching of the ICE calculator data. Noting ICE calculator does a very good job referring to this is a census data. This is a like Department of Labor data point. And there were also fields mentioned earlier where, as LBNL mentioned, PG&E has completed our survey, which means we have our survey specific results. And because we are in this space between phase 1, where it is only the Northeast utilities, the first set of utilities to go through, and phase 2, when all of the California IOUs are officially rolled into the tool, we figured in order to slightly improve, noting it doesn't mean it's gone through the full analysis that LBNL broke down. We did include the values where we specifically had it in this survey, which we are permitted to share by my understanding. We just provided the value there to update the calculator to be more specific to PG&E's own customer base. So wanted to make sure it was clear that those are kind of the 3 types of sources that we are using in order to get a more accurate picture of PG&E's customer base. Next slide, please. That then produces results of the disaggregation. And I'm going to walk through each table here, starting in the top left, dollars per CMI by residential and non-residential customer. As mentioned, we did do some comparison here of ICE 1.0, where we got 5 cents for residential CMI and 8 cents for ICE 2.0. We do see on the other side for dollars per non-residential CMI, it drops from ICE 1.0 at 29.17 to 23.11. And both of those tools actually do provide a aggregated or total value, which you do see here as a 333 and the 272. Though noting that in our methodology, we use the dollars residential CMI and dollars non-residential CMI, just providing that that value was also produced by the calculator. We then use these values to break down HFRA, HFTD, and non-HFRA, HFTD for all customers, though noting again that we did it at a more granular level when we were actually modeling. I think some of the points that I really want to highlight here in table 2 is just the differences in number of customers. Our residential customer percents, as we said, that was one of the variables that we use in order to calculate. And while obviously it doesn't apply at that granular level, it is something that very much informs where the total values did land out. And then, of course, the difference that you can see from ICE 1.0 to ICE 2.0 with some modest decline in the dollars per CMI that were calculated by both tools. Now, table 3, I think, is a little bit more in depth. We provided here a heat map of our divisions by calculating the dollars per CMI using that ICE 2.0 weighted value of service. I think somewhat unsurprisingly, more heavily industrialized or heavily urban areas are valued at a much higher dollars per CMI. And as you move to lower population, or just lower, particularly non-res areas, what you'll really see is a lowering of value all the way down, starting at, on the high end, San Francisco here at 2311 to values that I'm seeing as low as almost $1 for our more sparser populations. And I did want to kind of pay some attention to this because that did contribute to the methodology that we chose. I can go into that more at a little bit of a future time if needed. But we wanted to make sure that customers, regardless of location, were valued equally, rather than trying to shift this into a by customer practically, or like where you're located, where your household income is, the sparseness of your population, and whether or not that played into whether your value of service was high or low. So we believe that the way we chose in our disaggregated approach was appropriate for making sure that customers were valued equally. Next slide. Now this comes into our risk analysis itself, which risk has this impacted in the 2027 GRC submission, and how has this impacted wildfire and outages. So we have provided here the table, which we did provide on June 20th, the values explicitly of wildfire pre-PSPS, EPSS, PSPS, and EPSS, and then wildfire with PSPS and EPSS, and are aggregated with using both our risk-averse scaling. For those familiar with our GRC and our RAMP, we use a risk-averse scaling, as well as the risk-neutral scaling as requested in the ALJ, or ordered in the ALJ order, providing these values and the percent changes that we saw in those risk scores. Do want to note, all electric reliability risks in 27 GRC submission have been impacted, meaning kind of as expected, if you used if the risk used an electric reliability value, we did provide in that June 20th, all of them changed. And I will say not all of them actually changed in the negative direction, but I did want to focus the discussion here on risk related, of course, to SB-884. Do want to also note, as I kind of laid out in the beginning, April 22nd is when ALJ gives us the order to do this disaggregation approach. April 29th-ish, correct me if I'm wrong, was when ICE 2.0 was released. We had our May 15th filing of our general rate case, and then June 20th is when we had this response disaggregation approach released. So in terms of our overall GRC, which typically kind of starts before our RAMP submission, a year and a half before our RAMP submission, so things really started building in our calculation of reliability as well as all of the risk. Really started, I'm going to say, in 2023 and January 2023. I think our kickoff, if I'm not wrong, was actually December 2022 for that. So want to note that relatively 1 month is a very tight timeline. So I will kind of lean into questions regarding, well, did you try this? Did you experiment with this? We did some pseudo cases to kind of see how ICE 2.0 plays out, but we have not had a lot of time to run with ICE 2.0 and play out numerous actual scenarios in order to really see the full impact of ICE 2.0, as we would definitely like to and plan to do in the future as we gain a lot more maturity with ICE 2.0. So that covers my second and third bullets, and fourth, we do plan to play with ICE 2.0 more. I do really appreciate the new UI. I do really appreciate the kind of more informative and yet more limited variables that we see when we're using ICE 2.0, and definitely see us moving forward with ICE 2.0, obviously per the decision, but also just per the more up-to-date tool. Noting phase 2, phase 3, I am excited for seeing how all of this changes as more utilities get in. And as the entire formulas and aggregated data does play a role in the way we calculate the value of electric reliability and the value of service. I also do want to note there's more than just dollars per CMI that ICE 2.0 is calculating. That is something that is also very interesting as we continue to look forward to how can we best apply a value of service. And there is a second or a final subpart that I am just going to respond to in the questions from CPUC with this note. We do stand by our risk-averse scaling and our system-wide aggregated electric reliability values for the test year 2027 GRC and the CBR values that we calculated therein. Noting that again, I think we kicked off December 2022 and really started working towards what ends up as our GRC through the RAMP beginning of 2023. So this 1 month that we had, we really did push hard to get a good and accurate representation of using ICE 2.0 with the disaggregated approach. However, it's not replacing 2.5 years of really hard work at all of our risks to calculate electric reliability, build out mitigation plans, forecasts, and everything that is associated with calculating those CBRs. I think our next slide passes it over to, nope, one more on mine. Sorry, jumping ahead of myself. This is a graph of that table that you just saw. I actually thought this was kind of a more informative look than just reading the numbers. You can see the incremental changes as we move from ICE 1 aggregated to ICE 1 disaggregated, ICE 2 aggregated, and ICE 2 disaggregated. So that is just that table we had on the previous slide. Did find the bar graph is a little bit more informative of how those changes with risk-averse scaling, the graphs on the left, and risk-neutral scaling, the graphs on the right. Sorry. Now I think it's my final slide.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. This is Justin Sadler with PG&E's undergrounding program. So I'm going to be covering this last question and then also just kind of wrapping this up with some takeaways on our project list data. Question 1D, has this changed PG&E's wildfire system hardening strategy in the 2027 GRC? So generally, no, this has not really changed our system hardening strategy. Not only because, GRC has already been filed, but more importantly, we use WDRM, so our wildfire distribution risk model version 4, to select the projects that we included in our GRC submission. We use sort of a 1 through N risk ranking to select those projects. So although obviously ICE 2.0 has some changes associated with it, it has not impacted the projects that we nominated for the GRC. So I think that's relatively straightforward, no major changes in strategy there. And then going to the last slide, there's two kind of main takeaways that we want to leave with, and we're going to have, we go to the next slide, please. So there's two main, I think we're gonna go one more. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so there's two main or takeaways that we want to leave with, and these are also going to be in our written comments that we're submitting today. So the first is, given the differences in ICE 1.0 and 2.0, we would recommend that the reliability risk information that a utility provides should correspond to the version of the ICE calculator that they're using in their analysis. So that would be a change in the data list requirements, depending on the type of calculator used, and we'll go into some more detail on that in our written comments. And then the second point we wanted to leave with is in terms of the information in Table 6, we'd recommend that this be reported at the system level. Elijah discussed a few minutes ago that there's some inequity when we start looking at sort of more granular levels of data, including at sort of the operational prediction level. And that's largely attributed to income level and other variables that change. So a recommendation would be to present this information at the system level to reduce that bias. And again, we'll go into some more detail on that in our written comments, but wanted to kind of wrap up our presentation with those 2 points. And we're happy to answer any questions that the folks have on the call.
Okay. Well, thank you for getting us almost right back to the original schedule. And let's now take questions for PG&E. Okay, great, Eddie. I was about to go, but I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Could we start by going through slide 45, please? I have a series of questions that I'm probably going to have to ask. Great, thanks. Is this, yeah, 45, sorry. Next one. Great. Elijah, could you just read the first sentence that you've quoted from the judge's ruling there?
Provide parallel reliability cost calculations using the disaggregated approach recommended in the SPD evaluation report.
And could you remind me what was the disaggregated approach that was discussed in the SPD evaluation report?
I don't actually have that directly in front of me. Sorry.
And I think we worked on that. It was a series of data requests that SPD requested from PG&E. And I believe part of it was asking PG&E to disaggregate by HFTD territory and whether or not a circuit segment was using EPSS technology. Can you confirm that?
I again don't have that in front of me. I'll say our June 20th filing includes the much greater detail about how we did it, as well as the model results for it. So I would say that would be the place I'd have to go. So I don't actually have that in front of me.
Okay. Could I go to slide 49 then? Well, actually, I just want to make sure on slide 46. When you are talking about the 8 cent per CMI and the $23 per CMI, can you confirm that you used PG&E's total territory-wide number of residential customers and non-residential customers to generate those values? Is that correct?
Yes, if you go to the next slide, actually, you can see here, these are the values that we used.
And these are essentially the same values that you used in the aggregated approach for ICE 1.0.
Yes.
It's just that you combined the small and the mediums together. Is that correct? There might be some slight adjustments.
Yes, we added them together, noting that there is only the input of non-residential for ICE 2.0. It's ICE 1.0 that splits it up. So yes, our option was to move it into one value.
Great, and I'll have some follow-up questions about that for Lawrence Berkeley after the break. Okay, great. So it was it's all residents across the PG&E territory. So what you interpreted as disaggregated was just the difference between residential and non-residential. Is that correct?
No, not exactly. If you can go back one slide. So this is why we provided this example here. Our dollars per CMI are the same for non-residential and residential. And this was in the, and I think I see where you're going with your line of questions. This is the way it is applied through that series of DRs, though rolling it to the kind of greater overall model, which we did not do through that overall DR, through the data request. Noting that we did start at this circuit segment level. We did also revise our model so that after we did this, we analyzed the customers at each circuit segment. We rolled that into a tranche, and we actually did revise the way our model is analyzing, and that it ran this at the tranche level and then brought it up. So the results that you're seeing at the end is that roll up from circuit segment goes to tranche then goes to full risk. So previously you would have just seen that more as a actually tranche going into full risk. Whereas now we have broken it all the way down to circuit segment. The customers are aggregated at that circuit segment level. And this goes into the next piece of, if you run ICE calculator and say we tried to run a circuit segment level, particularly with these small numbers, you adjust any of those variables like income level by even a little bit, and you'll see a wild swing in values. We also, as we indicated in that table of different areas.
Yeah, I have a question about that too, but we'll come to that in a second.
Yeah, it would very much encourage that we continue to polish all San Francisco lines before we actually consider improving anything in a high fire threat district, basically, if we are looking at pure risk value.
Right. So, okay, that actually gets to one of my questions. But first, I just want to make sure that you clarify that you did not use the circuit segment level residential customers and total customers. You didn't run that through the ICE calculator. All you're doing is just multiplying the percentage of customers by the two different values of CMI that you've calculated at the territory-wide value.
We did not calculate each region using the ICE 2.0 calculator. We did not do each circuit segment. We did not do smaller granular levels. We're calculating this dollars per CMI. It is a higher level calculation, yes.
But you did do that for the DRs. I mean, you just remembered just a second ago that you did do that for the DRs that we worked on during the ramp. So let's go to slide 49 real quick. Yeah, so yeah, could you explain San Francisco to me, like especially the HFTD tier 2? So if I'm reading this correctly, then you only have one non-residential customer in San Francisco.
Yes,
in
true.
That.
Yeah,
sorry.
There's one residential customer. It's mostly, yeah, it's mostly like non-residential. That's why it's close to non-residential value of service.
But
sorry, this is Santosh Lamashane with PG&E.
Yes.
One of our technical experts is speaking.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure though that it's only one non-residential, right? Because wouldn't it just be the non-residential times your non-residential value? That's why it's 23.11. I mean, it's exactly the same value as your non-residential CMI.
Let me see. Hold on.
Sorry, we're looking at values here.
So we have a very less residential, so almost like all of them are non-residential. That's why like we have the non-residential value.
Okay, but this gets to the point that if you had run the ICE calculator with just the population that's in San Francisco HFTD Tier 2, it wouldn't be 2311. It would be a different value.
We didn't run that, so we wouldn't know that.
Okay, but you could run it, and that's actually what Table 6 in the SB-884 data template is you know, kind of it's aiming towards. And I know that Elijah, you wanted to ask about the income question, and I actually wanted to ask about that as well, kind of connected to slide 53.
Let's go to slide 53. And yeah, I just to clarify a little bit, kind of as we're pointing out here, we did do some sampling, and I believe actually some of our utility partners have brought it up previously in the SB-884. What we found when running ICE 2.0 calculator is it very much tells you people who are badly impacted by PSPS, their value's down, so don't make improvements for them, which very much seems counterintuitive because of the way that it calculates out a KD and the way it calculates the dollars per CMI using that KD value. So if you took exactly the same group of population, all other variables the same, particularly when you're only doing smaller numbers of customers, and then adjust that KD up and down, or adjusting your SAIDI up or down, so people who are either severely impacted by PSPS or not hardly impacted by PSPS, you would absolutely see that we should treat the people who are not impacted by PSPS. We should treat them better and keep improving their reliability because it's a higher value to improve on them.
Thanks, Elijah.
And then the second point is, as Chris kind of alluded to with this low income, high income, the people at the lower income level, if you have more in that bracket, the value of service that you see goes down because those people at the higher income valued their service higher, but which then comes out with a higher dollars per CMI in the higher income, or a lot of lower income people, lower dollar per CMI. But then the difference in their GDP, which is not considered when you consider dollars per CMI, is that the lower income is obviously much more impacted than the people with the higher income because they do not have as much of a difference. So that was kind of, that led a lot into our choice of not wanting to value customers differently, especially as we are aware from environmental and social justice pilot and the like, there are disadvantaged and vulnerable communities within our high fire threat district and HFRA. And so we thought it very inappropriate in a 1 month scale to try to just go ahead and run something out that we knew devalued our DVCs and made them less important than non-residential customers located adjacent to San Francisco.
Okay, great, Elijah. So a couple of different questions. So the first is that you have run these models, you have run the values through ICE 2.0. Is that correct? I mean, initially you told me that you have not, but
no, I haven't run it for exact scenarios. I actually, again,
great. So let's go to the next set of questions.
I would like to finish. One moment. We use pseudo values, not an actual representative of each location. And you can just do that with API, calculate the different impacts of variables while holding the other ones still.
Okay.
So did not do it for a specific scenario or a specific region.
Okay, great. So also, though, I want to ask about table 6 because that's kind of a question here in this workshop, right? Could you remind me, does table 6 have a listing for income, like mean income or median income? If I remember correctly, it does not. So could you just use since, you know, like you've stated that like PG&E has used the same data values that the ICE 2.0 calculator has used as a default, could you use the mean income level for California even though you're adjusting the rest of the variables in the ICE calculator? Because actually that's exactly what you did during the DRs last year in the ramp application. You didn't actually calculate different income values for each of the areas that you guys measured. You used only the mean value. So I think you could actually do that with table 6, and it should address some of these concerns. Is that correct?
The mean value, and I'm trying to pan over here to table 6. I'm thinking you're referring to slide 47. Yes.
Slide 47.
We see residential mean household income.
Right. Yeah.
Are we-
So that's an ICE calculator provided value, right? And as it, even if you disaggregated this according to different territory, you reduce the number of residential and non-residential, you could still continue using that mean value. Is that correct?
Can we stop real quick? We're talking about table 6 in the proposed SPD updated data requirement.
Okay.
But
Sorry.
it
I was
but
looking
that
at my slide for table 6.
that table does not require PG&E to provide a mean income value.
That's correct. We don't see that in the table.
Thank you. Okay, great. That's pretty much my series of questions. I don't think I have anything additional that I wanted to follow up. I really appreciate you guys letting me fire off a bunch of different questions. I have a couple of other questions for
Eddie,
LMBL later, but yeah, we'll continue the conversation then.
Sorry, Eddie, can we just go back to your last point there? So table 6 right now is based on ICE 1.0. So even though it doesn't include, the income level, I mean, it seems like there's like a disconnect here between ICE 1.0 and 2.0 input values. So would that be something that we would include if we were using ICE 2.0?
So if you look on the table to the left on this slide, in the past, median household income was included. And again, we did not ask for that to be adjusted in table 6. We have not asked for that information.
So do want to point that out, actually. You bring up a good point here. The yellow indicates that this is a value that ICE 1.0 is sensitive to on the left. The white on ICE 2.0 indicates this is a value that ICE 2.0 is not sensitive to. So if you just try to base everything on mean household income using ICE 2.0, you will not actually affect the dollars for CMI. I think we're actually considering proposing not even including that because it does represent a bit of a confusion factor because you did not change your ICE calculator by changing that value. It is a provided variable, but at this time, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris and Christina, this does not reflect any sort of sensitivity. So you would have to do this percentage of residential customers by annual income breakdown, and actually will have to find your actual income classes that you are seeing. Kind of another reason why I think this system-wide level might be a better look, just because, again, then you're having to break down regional household income levels, which may not always be available data. And also, again, kind of pointing towards, we really did not, in our test, like the idea of devaluing select customers for their value of service, particularly based on their income level, did not feel particularly appropriate.
Thank you. I just want to mention one more time that I don't believe that the annual income values are actually in table 6 either. I do not see them in table 6, Elijah.
Okay. Yeah, that's ICE 1.0. Sorry, I'm actually much less familiar with ICE 1.0.
Yeah, but yeah. So I guess your suggestion then is that we would not ask for the percentage of residential customers by annual income to be included in table 6 for ICE 2.0. That's your recommendation?
No, I would, for ICE 2.0, it's yellowed here, meaning I would include it, because that will affect the values that you get out of ICE 2.0 calculator.
So you do want to make it less equitable?
So I think our overarching position is that we want to use the system level values, so we would not technically need this breakdown.
So we would include the values that we provide here. That's why they're highlighted in yellow. That's what I was saying.
All right. Thanks, guys. Matthew, I think you're muted, but I can see that you're trying to talk.
Yeah, that just to be very clear is what PG&E is proposing is to use these percentages if they're representing the system, 26.6, 25.4, et cetera, for each calculation instead of adjusting them by tranche or geography. And that way you don't create the wealth differences that they're concerned about. Is that correct?
Sorry,
this is directed to PG&E. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. We had some issues getting off mute there. So we just had a quick little offline conversation here. So our position is that we would like to produce these values at the system level, which means that in order to do so, we would have to provide the percentage of residential customers by income at the system level in order to back up that analysis. That's what our proposal would be for table 6, is incorporating those data points.
Okay, that's how I understood it. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for PGE on their 1.0 versus 2.0? Yes. Okay. So go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, I was just hoping that PG&E could provide a little more justification for that position, particularly with respect to not breaking it into HFTD tiers, especially given the fact that SB-884 only applies to HFTD tiers 2 and 3.
Yes, it's very much meant to avoid devaluing customers, giving this customer more importance because of their higher income, giving this customer more importance because they're less impacted by PSPS.
But if you're excluding the non-HFTD customers, and you're still averaging your high and low income customers within the HFTDs, no?
So you would propose then a value for the entirety of HFTD, HFRA, that there's a single value for that. Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm wondering why that's not the given approach, since that's the population in question for SB-884. We've already decided to look at California and not look at the non-California residents. So why not make the additional geographic restriction?
And I'm just going to clarify that this was part of a data request that PG&E did for ICE 1.0 during the ramp. So that calculation has already been done.
So this is Santosh Lamisani with PG&E. So one of the issues, I think the LBNL folks can help us here. If we were to go a very granular subset and enter some of the population or 1%, we would have to make sure parameters are tailored to that subset. So in the ICE calculator, if there is multiple parameters that we have to enter for a subset of customers, we have to do that for all. And for that kind of data, we don't have that granular details of how much manufacturing is in that HFTD tier 1, how much healthcare customers are there. We don't have that kind of granularity. And if we don't have that kind of granularity and we input something, we change population, but we don't change other input parameters, the results we get out of that can be pretty misleading. So that's the reason why we don't want to do that.
So you're saying you don't have like locations of critical facilities in your HFTD tiers?
We do, but we don't have all the numbers, like all the manufacturing percent, healthcare percent, exact incomes, things like that. We don't have that kind of precision when sample size get to like less than 1,000 or something.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ian Fisher, you have a question?
Yeah, just one observation with actually using the full territory is, both HFRAs and HFTDs change. And so whilst I appreciate that you can use the HFTDs, it's going to be a little more robust if you use the whole territory.
So would we have a sample? Okay, if we're talking about HFTD versus non-HFTD, maybe that's reasonable, but I don't know. We can't say because the ICE calculator was designed by using system level data of all the utilities, right? It's not like, yeah, they ask all these granular questions, but at the end of the day, they come up with the regressions and they sometimes cancel each other out. And when we have a larger sample, the results make sense. But when we go granular like that and break it down and dissect into the divisions, tiers, it's going to get really, really granular. And I think some of the estimates we get out of can be like, I can't even estimate the statistical significance of it. So that's, I think that's an issue.
Sorry, I have to kind of, at least I could ask the folks from Lawrence Berkeley if they could answer whether or not that's correct. Is it not possible to do less than a utilities system-wide average to use the ICE calculator to generate a value? My understanding is that there have been some utilities that have been using the ICE calculator to run very granular analysis. Is that correct? Christina?
I can say that we've heard of at least one large utility who is using the ICE calculator to model estimated benefits and costs at the circuit level of their service territories.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Go ahead, Stefan. This will take this question.
Yeah,
then
we
before
can.
we go
Yeah,
to break.
I can take it. I can take it after the breaks. I would like input from the Lawrence Berkeley lab as well.
Okay. Then why don't we go on the break now? It's 3:07 and come back at 3:17. And continue the conversation. All right. Into the stretch run here. Why don't we move on to our general conversation and open the floor to questions to PG&E or LBNL or any other general comments. And okay, good. We have a question from Yumi. Please.
Right. Hello everyone. I'm Yumi from PG&E.
Hi, somebody's not on mute. Please mute your phone so we can hear Yumi.
Okay, so I want to make a comment about the DR that Eddie mentioned earlier. That Eddie SPD requested last year on our ramp. The analysis that we did at the time, or the analysis that was requested at the time, Eddie, was using ICE calculator with the inputs on the number of customers to vary by 4 areas. So tier 2, tier 3, non-HFTD EPSS enabled and non-HFTD EPSS not enabled. So in a way, we have dollar per CMI at the time that was computed based on weighted average of dollar per CMI for residential and medium and high and small non-residential customers for each of those 4 regions. But then essentially that analysis was using the same dollar per CMI for residential and non-residential medium and high and non-residential small, right? So the analysis that was done at the time was probably similar approaches we have taken in the ALJ ruling using ICE2 calculator. The difference is that this time we are using more granular data. At the time, there were only 4 separation of geographic areas. Now we are doing at the most granular level, at the customer level, and we look at whether the customer is residential or non-residential, and then taking the weighted average based on the number of customers at the trench level, right? So rather than aggregating up to that 4 regions, we are actually going more granular.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Yumi, but I just so you guys actually sent us the actual ICE calculator model that you took those 4 granular regions, the number of customers and what have you input them into the ICE calculator model. Are you telling me that you've done that for every circuit segment now? Is that no? That's not what you've done, right?
So running the ICE calculator at the time, right? And now as well, we inputted the number of customers for each of those 4 regions to the ICE calculator, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was what was requested.
Yes.
It's going to be the same impact now that we are using different number of customers, right? But it doesn't, number of customers do not impact the dollar per CMI for residential versus non-residential.
Is that okay? That's that would be. So you're saying that the only thing that impacted the differences in your previous DR was just essentially the reliability values that you calculated for those different areas. But if I remember correctly, you didn't change any of the KD and SAFE numbers the SAFE and SADI numbers for those regions, and yet you developed very different outputs. For each of those 4 regions, you had very different levels of CMI. So could you explain what caused that? You're saying that it was not the different demographic population of those areas, the different numbers of non-residential customers in those 4 regions did not impact the 4 different CMI values that you came up with in those data requests.
So the what impacted the regional level dollar per CMI was the number of customers by customer type.
Yes.
Right. And that's why there were 4 different values for each, 4 different values of dollar per CMI at the time.
That's correct. And this time you've only generated 2 values.
No. If I don't know whether we have a slide for that.
Using the ICE calculator, you've only generated 2 values.
It's the same. We essentially have different dollar per CMI for each trench. So for the wildfire risk, there are 20 trenches, for example. Then there are 20 different values of dollar per CMI now.
Okay.
Right. So this time, this aggregated approach is even more granular than the 4 geographic areas that you suggested last time.
Is it? Thanks, Yumi. I appreciate the clarification. I did have some questions for Lawrence Berkeley, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. I had a question about the API, and actually it's related to something that Brian had said. It sounds like, Brian, you guys have, so it's kind of a dual question for Brian and for Lawrence Berkeley. But my understanding, Brian, is that when you were running, your kind of test runs in the online version of the tool, did it generate an API key for you when you ran your test?
Yes, you're required to generate your own key. That's correct.
And my question for the folks at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, is it true that this key could technically be shared so that another user could basically see the exact analysis that was conducted on the tool?
That is not the case at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, not at the moment.
Yeah, not at the moment. I'm not sure. I think Pete had said something to somebody about using the API key to share model inputs. Currently, that's not how it works. But if there's some need for sharing model inputs, that's certainly something we can discuss at our end, and is not a heavy lift.
I see. So could you explain that? I guess what does the model key actually do? It's not a unique identifier for a run on the API.
No, it's a unique identifier linked to a person. So generating an API key just lets you use the API, and whenever an API key is passed, the system looks up the user associated with that and makes sure that it's a real person with an account.
Oh, I see. So the API that Brian generated is only unique to Brian. It's not unique to the model run that he created.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, I think I'll hold off for my other questions and let others speak, because I've done a lot of speaking today.
Okay, so next up then is Stefan.
Oh, thank you. And I apologize for the background noise. We're dealing with RTO here at Energy Safety, and it's a little cramped right now. So thank you for your time. I really think this is a powerful macroeconomic tool. And the SB-884 undergrounding bill does specifically call for a collective analysis of undergrounding projects. I think it's uncontroversial in this audience to say that this tool aims to fulfill that collective aspect. But the bill also calls for analysis of separate mitigations. And I was wondering if the folks from the Berkeley Labs could comment on the appropriateness of the use of this tool for evaluating individual undergrounding projects, which are often at the circuit segment level, which are often less than a mile of undergrounding, and obviously a very small percent of the entire system. So I guess to say that more succinctly, is this tool appropriate for project level analysis? And if so, what level of granularity for the inputs would you recommend?
So I definitely do want to perhaps defer to Joe on this as well. But I will say that, what we can say, while we can't provide specific recommendations on the use of the tool, we can say what it does and does not do. And I will say that, with respect to, applying a specific use case, if you're able to provide the level of granularity that the inputs require of the tool, that you should be able to use it. That said, we don't want to provide specific recommendations for your specific uses. We definitely want to encourage you to just sort of explore the tool a little more and determine what inputs you have and don't have, and whether or not it then makes sense to sort of use the tool for that more granular purpose. Joe, maybe you have more thoughts on this.
I don't have anything to add to that, Christina.
All right, I did it then. Thank you.
I think I'm going to clarify or maybe even ask Stefan a question. Stefan, do you see the ICE calculator tool as being as being used to analyze the undergrounding project, or is it being used to estimate a monetized value of risk?
Well, that's exactly the question that I'm asking. Is it appropriate for that? Is it appropriate for either of either or neither of those two things? And I would actually like to hear if PG&E had, or any of the other utilities have an opinion on this.
Hi, this is Elijah Devon. I just wanted to say we've only really applied it in the risk scenario, especially using in this line. So I cannot actually speak specifically to whether or not it works for mitigation by mitigation type analysis. We do want to build on it in our risk analysis over the coming years through RAMP and GRC where we use it there. But yeah, have not had the opportunity to experiment that much to say whether or not it works for the scenarios you're mentioning.
Okay. Any other questions? Any comments from CPUC staff, Fred, Eddie, before we wrap up?
Not from me.
Okay. Well then, I think we can wrap up and thank everybody. This was a very active TWG3, a lot of very detailed information. And as we said, the data template table, including table 6, will be distributed in a month on July 24th.
Thank you, everyone. It was great discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll call